Hi, this is Jeff Rouse checking in again from Our Story Studios, and look who stopped to see me.
Hey, Jeff. I'm Jim Marushin. I'm the curator at the Martin County Historical Society.
Well, it's a pleasure seeing you again. You know, we just got done shooting an episode not very long ago with Lenny, your boss, right?
That's true.
And how long have you been at the museum?
I have been there a little over 10 years now.
Wow. Well, that went by quick for me.
Yeah, me as well.
I've seen you over the years there. Tell me, what's your favorite part of working at the museum?
My favorite part would be discovering something new every time you walk around there.
Wow. And there's so much in there. I have no doubt that that would be the case because I see something new every time, and it's always very interesting.
Yeah.
Say, because we just shot that episode with Lenny, would you like to see that right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's take a look. Lenny, thank you for coming back and joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
We just continue to have you on because all of these stories tie in so well with the museum because you have so much stuff at that museum.
We do have a lot of things.
That's awesome. Well, we have some great reports for the folks today. Let's get started right away, shall we?
Sounds good.
First one that we're going to show is the history of hospitals in our community, and it was done on Hometown Focus by Fred Krahmer.
Oh, sure.
And there's all kinds of footage and different things. I think the folks are going to really like it. Why don't we show them right now?
Sounds good.
Welcome to Hometown Focus. I'm your host, Jeff Hagan. Well, this week we're taking a look back on some stories we've done in the past on this area's rich history. In our first story, reporter Fred Krahmer gives us a look at the history of the Fairmont Community Hospital.
Behind me is the Fairmont Community Hospital as we know it today, but it hasn't always been like this. Over 71 years, from its beginnings as a number of privately owned hospitals in downtown Fairmont to its present status as a multi-million-dollar facility supported by nonprofit funds, the Fairmont Community Hospital has become a source of pride in our community. Before 1928, the Hunt Hospital, run by father and son doctors Ferdinand and Roscoe Hunt, was probably the most well-known facility. But according to Dr. Mike Thayer, there were several other smaller hospitals in the area, and running one didn't require much.
Beds and white sheets. And other than that, I think they were not supervised by the state, and the hospitals were as the individual wanted to make them.
Between them, doctors Mike Thayer, Harold Williamson, Neil Nickerson, and Jack Gardner have over 160 years of experience working with the Fairmont Community Hospital. They graciously agreed to share their memories with us. Dr. Gardner explained how his father, V.H. Gardner, bought the Ludke residence and an adjoining site in 1927. Gardner was then joined by a couple of associates from Waseca to help bring the concept of a hospital as a team of doctors to life.
A Dr. Blanchard and a Dr. Miller came from Waseca too, and the three of them put up a fairly good-sized building just across from Lake Sisseton, and that was the beginning of the hospital as most of us knew it, I should say, because it's not there anymore.
Dr. Gardner was the first one in this community, medical community, to think, oh, maybe we could practice together as a group, we could do a better job. And so he's the one, in my opinion, who set this whole thing going with the hospital, clinic, Fairmont Clinic, and Hospital Corporation.
Dr. Nickerson described the 31-bed, privately owned facility.
The first floor was offices and a few beds. I think the pediatric beds were there at that time. And then the second floor was mixed general and medicine and surgery. And then the OB floor was the third floor. And on the top floor, there was the surgery and the obstetrical unit. And that's the way it was until we left that building in 72. Huh?
Right.
Right.
Early on, the doctor-owned hospital ran into tough times. Within a year, Vic Gardner left the association. Then, management disagreements emerged as money ran short. Soon, the hospital was on the verge of bankruptcy and on the edge of closing its doors. But the adversity brought our community together. Soon, both doctors and members of the community were joining together to form the hospital anew.
Let's put our name on the note and we'll pay this thing off out of the operation of the clinic, out of the operation of the hospital. So that was accomplished. And the first group, there were 8 fellows on that board that ran the Fairmont Community Hospital as it was newly owned.
As a building, the old hospital across from Ward Park was in a state of disrepair, and it was causing stress among the staff. Dr. Nickerson recalls how he was greeted when he joined the hospital.
One of the fellows who was an internist who preceded me here, he said, this hospital's a dump. And he said, nobody wants to change anything. You've come to the wrong place. Welcome, huh? In any case, I thought, well, that's a challenge, isn't it? But you had a feeling that patients came in to see us, where they'd say, well, I think I'll go to Rochester then, and we'd make a diagnosis, and then they didn't want to be treated here, because the hospital's reputation was, there wasn't anything bad going on, but there wasn't enough good going on to really be able to offer services that encouraged people to stay here.
These 4 doctors, along with the rest of the staff, took the challenge head on. There was a need for more space and new equipment, and to accomplish this, a need to raise funds to keep pace with our growing community. So in 1955, the Hospital Association reorganized and opened up membership to anyone interested for a fee of $25. In 1956, 440 people purchased memberships, and the way was paved for building an expansion. The remodeling of the old hospital and the new addition was completed in 1958. The facility now boasted 65 beds, 2 operating rooms and an ER room, a delivery room, and a nursery. In addition, the staff physicians put their heads together to find ways to bring new doctors here to Fairmont.
We said, we can't get young doctors to come here anymore. They don't want to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week on call every day and night. We couldn't recruit young doctors. So we said, let's all get together, which several of us did. A few did not go with that, Dr. Wanke being one of them. We all went together, and we formed what is now the Fairmont Mayo Clinic system.
In the late 60s, the community's size and needs once again dictated expansion.
And we had a study done, and after the study was done, we all got together and talked about it, and everybody felt go to a new site, build an adequate facility, and then that's what really got us all together talking about forming a clinic near the hospital, attached to the hospital. So we were all very pleased then, and it slowly evolved, but we got there.
In June of 1971, the doctor-owned and managed Fairmont Medical Clinic built its building before the hospital was even completed. A year later, the 114-bed hospital opened its doors. Since then, the Fairmont Community Hospital has continued its pattern of growth and change. A 40-bed nursing home wing became the Lutz Wing to reflect the $1 million-plus donation from the estate of Elsa Lutz. Throughout the 80s and 90s, a myriad of new programs were added, including dialysis, spiral CT scanning, the birthplace, and comprehensive rehabilitation services. In 1991, yet another renovation project added a new emergency department, radiology services, and a surgical suite. While all of this growth was taking place in Fairmont, the doctors agreed that the biggest challenges facing the medical profession was happening on the national level. With the introduction of insurance, the relationship between doctor and patient was permanently changed. Then, with the introduction of government assistance, the playing field was changed once again.
It was always customary for me to give my clergymen wholesale rates for nothing. Mostly for nothing. Until one of my partners, and then that kind of expanded to where several clergymen were on the list too. And one of my partners remarked to me, he says, you know, Mike, he said, any one of those fellows is making more money than you are right now. So we discontinued the wholesale business.
My father-in-law practiced in Pennsylvania, and the world came crashing down there, and he got several fees in coal for a bill that his services rendered. He got coal. They'd come in and dump it in his yard for him. Times have changed, huh?
They sure have. For Hometown Focus, this is Fred Krahmer, Jr.
a great report and very interesting to hear our history to do with hospitals.
Right.
So what can we find in the museum that tells part of our history with hospitalization and such?
Well, we have quite a few things on display at the museum, both medical items and a dentist chair. And we also have displays showing pioneer doctors in Martin County, which is really interesting, plus a lot of the medical equipment, and I can't name each one now because I'm not that skilled in medicine, but we have a lot of the medical equipment, x-ray machines from years ago that are just amazing to look at compared to what we have now. So things have really changed over the years, no question about that.
Boy, haven't they? And when they were talking about healthcare and such, it's just, you just kind of listen to that and go, really?
Yeah.
They don't know what the future is going to be, good or bad, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Now, some of those pieces, when you're talking about those things
Yes.
at the museum, how did they come to the museum?
Well, they were donated by doctors.
Okay.
Or in some cases, the hospital. We have an iron lung.
Really?
I mentioned the x-ray machine and the dental chairs, but just a number of other examples like that. Plus examples of medications, medicines that were used years ago too. So we have a display case with that.
Now, some of the equipment, were they given to you because not only did they know they're historic, which they are, of course, but were they moving on to another type of care and they saw that this would be an interesting historical item?
I think that's probably the reason. Things change, and instead of just discarding it, because when it's gone, it's gone.
Absolutely.
They saw the need of showing the history of the item and putting it in the museum for that purpose.
Well, like what'd you say, the iron lung?
Mm-hmm.
That's not being used now.
No.
That's a very interesting piece to stop and see.
It dates back to polio back in the 50s and 60s,
Sure.
and before the polio vaccine. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. We'll come down and look. So, yes, we enjoyed that report, and we'll look forward to that. Okay. Now, the next, this is from Focus on Fairmont, so done in the 90s, and it's about the fire department.
Sure.
And the history of the fire department in Fairmont area. Let's take a look.
The Fairmont Volunteer Fire Department is the focus of our first story. 3 former fire chiefs join our history reporter, Marnie Brodt, for the first in a 2-part series.
In October of 1875, a prairie fire burned almost half of Martin County. Everything in its path was destroyed. Fire often destroyed settlements in the early days, and people would rush to the scene of the fire. They would try to put it out by passing buckets of water from the water to the fire. And as settlements grew bigger, volunteer fire departments and also paid establishments were started. The Fairmont Fire Brigade was incorporated in the late 1800s. At that time, the city presented the company with 3 ladders, 12 leather buckets, and 2 axes. 22 names were included on the initial roster. The first vehicle acquired was an old spring wagon donated by Clem Road.
The first fire station was sort of a stable, and the stable was it was across the street from what now is Central School, on the corner of First and North Park Street, or South Park Street, I guess it is. And that was kind of a long stable, and all their equipment was kept in there. Right next to that building was the water tower. Well, it was a wooden tank is actually what it was, under pressure, and that's where they would get their water from to take it out to the fire scene.
Back in the late 1800s, the fire department didn't have their own set of horses to pull the fire equipment with, so whoever happened to be on the fire department and had their own set of horses would try to get to the station first, and then they would get paid $2 if they were the team that happened to pull the equipment to the fire, so they were quite a rivalry to get to the station first.
In the old station, they used to have a tower or kind of a steeple up there, and they would climb, a couple firemen would climb to the top of that steeple, and then they would take ropes and pull up their hoses so the hoses could drain and dry out that way. Kind of under the same principles that we do today with they call them hose towers. So the principle hasn't changed an awful lot in all these years.
Prior to 1908, there was no fire hall in Fairmont, but the firemen met in various buildings, maybe in the bank at Fred Betts' office, maybe in the Acme cigar factory, or in Albion Hall. Early records show that there was a lot of energy put into the fireballs, the fireman's ball it was called, and one of them even netted $3.50. In 1908, a city hall was built on First Street, just east of what is now the photo press. The city hall was built to include the fire department. The fire barn occupied the east side, and a couple of firemen slept in the living quarters above it.
The second story was the sleeping quarters, and there were regular bunk beds up there and regular beds, and that was where their meeting hall was also. When the alarm did come in, they would hear it by the whistle. They usually blew the steam whistle, which was at the power plant. They would hear that, and of course then they did have the brass pole. They would slide down to the first story where all the equipment was kept.
The city had finally purchased a pair of dappled grays.
The team was stored down in the basement, and that's where they were stabled and fed and so on. And when the fire call would come in, the men on duty, if it was in the evening, would slide down the old brass pole to the first floor, get the wagon all ready, bring the team around, bring the team into the fire station, and then the harnesses that went around the horses were lowered from the ceiling. There were quick connect harnesses and snapped up real quick, and they were all set to go, and out of the station they would go and fly to the emergency scene or the fire.
After they got horses, those that were used in the fire department were also used by the city for road construction and so on, and if the fire whistle went during the day, they might have a long ways to go to get back to the fire hall and be tuckered out before they got hooked up and ready to go to a fire again.
Fairmont had the distinction of hosting the Firemen's State Convention in June of 1914. The president of the State Firemen's Association was also Fairmont's mayor, Harry Searle. The closing day of 1914 brought Fairmont its most destructive fire in the city's history up to that time. 13 businesses and individuals sustained losses totaling $80,000. The fire destroyed most of the businesses on the west side of the 100 block of what is now called Downtown Plaza. Otto's Meat Market, Edwards Drug Stores, Bomboy's Department Store, Crooker's Jewelry, and 2 doctors' offices and living quarters for 4 people went up in smoke. That was approximately an eighth of Fairmont's 1914 main business district. In 1923, the first motorized vehicle was purchased for Fairmont. It was a LaFrance fire engine, which is now displayed at the Fairmont History Museum. That fire truck was probably on the scene of the Winsenburg elevator fire in 1946. Old-timers remember well the flames that lit up the sky during the historic fire on North Avenue. The smoke could be seen for miles. It drew a large crowd, as everyone was concerned that it was coming from their business. The next major fire in Fairmont's history was the Park Motor Company fire in November of 1952. It was located where the Salvation Army Corps Center is now. The Park Motor Building was destroyed.
I do know that that was a total loss fire. I did see the fire when I was a very young man. The after effects of the fire, there was an awful deep hole there, and all the new cars and the used cars and everything that was in the building and surrounding the building ended up in that hole. That was a very high financial loss to the city of Fairmont at that time.
The company suffered a $200,000 loss. It became Fairmont's heaviest loss by fire to that date. The construction of an $85,000 fire hall in 1954 provided the volunteer firefighting force with modern, up-to-date facilities. Over the next years, the department continued to serve the community. When a fire alarm sounded, it could mean a city call, rural, rescue, or call for mutual aid. Firefighters viewed not only loss of property, but sometimes loss of life. Next month, we'll continue our look at the Fairmont Volunteer Fire Department. We'll review the major fires of the 60s and 70s, note the changes in firefighting methods, and take a look at the new fire hall addition. For Focus on Fairmont, I'm Marnie Brodt.
Wow, very interesting. What a rich history in the fire department.
Yes, for sure.
You know, Marnie did a part 2 to this.
Really?
Why don't we show the folks?
Yeah, I think we
Let's
will.
do.
Thanks for staying with us. Last month we brought you the first of a 2-part series on the history of the Fairmont Fire Department. Well, now we're going to take you through the major fires of the 60s and 70s, hear about the changes in firefighting methods, and take a look at the new fire hall addition. Let's go to Marnie Brodt.
The city of Fairmont suffered 6 major fire losses between 1966 and 1976. In December of 1966, Stokely Van Camp's plant number 1 exploded and firefighters battled the fire for 2 days. It caused an estimated $1 million loss and idled over 100 workers in the plant.
I was on the fire department at that time, and if I remember right, it was Christmas Eve. I'm pretty sure it was Christmas Eve, and we were there for several days, and it was really cold, and we had icicles hanging on us quite a bit of the time. I remember Bob Schroeder took some pictures, and there was a chlorine tank, I think, that exploded, and he caught the explosion, kind of a fireball in the air, and he won a national prize from that.
I remember watching that. I was not a firefighter yet, but I remember watching that fire, and I could remember the firefighters getting close to the fire, and then some explosions would happen. They'd have to back off. They would try to get close again. More explosions would happen, and they'd have to back off again. And the first fire truck that the city of Fairmont had, the 1923 La France, was at that fire and pumped water through that whole fire.
A major part of Stokely Van Camp plant was saved and remained operative. In late September of 1969, the junior high school at Prairie and 2nd was the site of 2 separate fires happening 1 week apart. The first fire's serious damage was confined to the storage area. And then what happened?
Approximately 1 week later, the second fire occurred, but in between the first fire and the second fire, there was an article in the media about had the fire been set in another location in the building, it would have probably all gone up in flames and smoke, and that's exactly what the second fire really did.
Yes, the second fire completely destroyed the building. A 13-year-old boy admitted lighting both fires because he thought a new junior high school was needed. Some materials were salvaged, but the building was later razed. The site eventually became Veterans Park. 2 popular Fairmont landmarks were destroyed in 1972. One was Interlochen Ballroom.
There was a lot of people that were really heartbroken over that fire, including myself. I spent a lot of my teenage years and after years out in that particular ballroom. I believe we got the call in the middle of the afternoon, and by the time we got out there, just about the whole structure was involved. We barely got the hoses and the pumps operating and the deluge guns operating when the roof caved in. And it was like all of us were really teary-eyed when that roof went in because we all have fond memories. And it was a very unique historic place in the city. So that was a great loss to all of us and to the surrounding area because that drew an awful lot of people into Fairmont.
The sweet shop caught fire on a very hot summer afternoon.
Sweet shop fire was another one. We had people on the front and the back and on the roof and everything else. And I remember very distinctly one part about it. Some of us were in the building and maybe should have known better, but we had people coming in the front and the back of the building both forcing the fire, and we must have been doing a good job because there was 3 or 4 of us in the front, and all of a sudden we heard a big puff and a bang, and the fire was behind us. It went over the top of us because we had fog spray, you know, trying to push the fire. And all of a sudden we had fire behind us, and it blew the windows out across the street where some people were standing. And we saved the rest of the block, but it was a good one.
Both the Interlochen Ballroom fire and the Sweet Shop fire saddened everyone in the community. There were such good memories of each. On December 18th, 1974, downtown area was struck again. A Fairmont businessman torched his own business, TWS Sound Equipment. The fire spread and also destroyed the S&H Green Stamp Redemption Center and the Discount Furniture Warehouse.
That was a good fire too. I don't know if I should use the word good, but it was a big one. That one was intentionally set, and it was the Green Stamp Store and the secondhand furniture store, TWS Sound Equipment, if I remember right, and Monty's Cafe was in there too, and we were there quite some time. That was That was a big fire, and after the fire, we spent quite a number of days there with Harold Husted was his name at the time. He was the fire marshal, and we dug through all of the derbus and stuff that was left from the fire down to the linoleum floor and so on, and found where an accelerant had been used to start the fire, and subsequently there was a court case, and the owner was convicted of arson.
Less than a year later, in October of 1975, the downtown Woolworth store was destroyed by fire that started in the upstairs apartments.
The Woolworths fire of 1975, that was one of the first fires, probably the first big fire call that I had ever gone on, and another tough fire for us to fight because it was so, it got into the various voids of the roof areas and that sort of thing, and we couldn't get at it very easily. And the thing that stands out in my mind about that one is sometimes you learn by doing the wrong thing, and I hadn't had a lot of training at that point, and I was upstairs with some guys, and they had to leave because their air supply had gone down and mine was still up. And so I thought, well, I can be Joe Fireman here, and I grabbed the hose and I went to the top of the ladder, not knowing that I should open the hose nice and slow, and I opened it full bore, and it knocked me right down to the ground. So I kind of quick looked around to see if anybody was looking, and nobody was, so I got back a hold of the hose and went back up the ladder, and the second time did it a little slower. So that's my memory of that fire.
The firefighting methods and equipment have improved considerably since then. Through the early 1970s, surround and drown was the principal method used. Basically, the volunteer firefighters would stick a hose in every window and door. However, sometimes the water caused more damage than the fire. With the acquisition of Scott air packs, protective gear, and training in fire science, the firemen were able to use a more modern firefighting method. The equipment and training allowed them to now enter a burning building and fight the fire from the interior. The idea was to push the heat out.
Firefighting has changed a lot just in the time that I've been on. When I first got on, we didn't have near the quality of equipment that we do now, and we kind of fought fires differently. We fought them more from the outside and poured water in, where now we enter the structure and go right in where the fire actually is. Our gear is a lot better. Hose and stuff is a little bit more reliable, and we try to go in right where the fire is at to put it out. So firefighting, I guess that's the biggest change that I see there. And we also, firefighting now is, we're real concerned with safety, and we have built-in accountability systems and little devices that if we have a problem, we can call for help or signal for help. It's another thing that's changed quite a bit.
A big thing I think was, and something I think that we're really lucky with in Fairmont, is the amount of equipment we have, and I mean good equipment, and we got to snorkel at one time, and that was really a lifesaver. I think we could go do things with that we couldn't do with the old hook and ladder that we had, which was really not very dependable. If you charged a hose and that was up, it would bow the whole ladder just about in a C shape, and we were called quite a few times for mutual aid to other towns. I know we went to, I think it was Delavan, to a big elevator fire one time, and a lot of the other towns around here.
Training for the fire service has changed a lot too since I got on. When we first got on, we kind of did our own in-house training, and there wasn't near the requirements, both time-wise and study-wise, that there are now. The fireman today has to go through a lot of training, but I really think it's for the better. Because we did, when I first got on, you kind of, a lot of the times you end up just by doing the thing, maybe doing it wrong, maybe doing it right. That's how you got your training, but now we're kind of trained, and we can't go into some situations that we're not trained for until we do have that training. And I think in that end, it's a lot safer for us and better for the people that we're here to protect, too.
Firefighters today are required to take 100 hours of firefighting classes, plus either 40 hours of first response or 120 hours of emergency medical training. The 32 men on the Fairmont Volunteer Fire Department roster responded in 1995 to 76 city fire calls, 17 rural, 30 rescue calls, and 3 mutual aid calls. That's a total of 126 calls. Also, a new addition was added to the fire station. This space accommodates the snorkel unit and allows it to be driven in one end and out the other. The snorkel unit is designed to fight elevator, apartment, and other tall building fires. The addition also allows room to store the ambulance units in one central location. In addition, handicapped accessibility to the fire hall was upgraded. Although the equipment and volunteers have changed over the years, the dedication of these firefighters has not. We are very grateful to all that have given of their time and risked their lives to serve our community. For Focus on Fairmont, I'm Marnie Brodt.
Another interesting report.
Very much so, yes.
Done quite some time ago.
Right.
So it's even changed since then, I have no doubt.
I'm sure.
If we want to learn more about the fire department and the history, what can we find at the museum?
Well, probably the most interesting thing would be the first motorized fire truck in Fairmont.
I've seen that, very cool.
Yeah, the American LaFrance, 1923 American LaFrance. Kids really enjoyed looking at it when they come and visit. Also, we've got, there have been just a number of historic significant fires in Fairmont over the years. We have pictures of those, and we have a binder of the history of the fire department too, which is really interesting.
Wow.
But I think not only the fire truck, but we have it's a pumper, a hose apparatus that was used for fires as well, and just a number of other things like that. So, but especially the fire truck.
Now, was this like the medical, donated to the museum kind of in the same direction where it became the items became obsolete, or people knew it was of significance to the community and they donated in that direction?
Actually, the fire truck came to the museum before my time there, but my understanding is that it was kept, I think, out at the airport, and it was just sort of in mothballs, you might say.
Sure.
And apparently somebody from the museum and the city got together and decided it should be in the museum, which is definitely where it should be.
Absolutely.
And it was brought there. And it's been used in parades. It's still operational. But to pull it out of the museum, we have to get a tow truck, have to take the air out of the tires, to just barely get it out of the garage door. And then the liquids, oil, gas, so forth, has to be put back in it, and then drained again before they put it back in the museum. Yeah. So it's kind of a process to get that all done. But it's been in parades. I think the last one is, I believe, 2012.
So it's been fairly recent history. It's been
yeah. So it's still operational.
So you got a pretty darn nice car. Maybe you should pull it in the parade.
Yeah, there you go. Try that.
That might be fun.
Might not work, but
that's right. Lenny, I want to thank you again. Thanks for helping share these great reports.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, there you have it, another episode of Martin County on TV.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Those were some very good reports.
Weren't they? We really enjoyed showing them to the folks. We want to thank you for stopping. Keep up the good work down to the museum. And we want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. And as we share with you the sponsors that made this show possible, remember, it's not just the past, but the present that tells our story.